up guys, Seth Lake with VSL Aviation here to do another training video. Today we're going to talk about something that a lot of pilots might be nervous about, and that is getting ramp inspected or ramp checked. So a ramp inspection is a way for the FAA to make sure that you're following all the rules, and it's something that they have the right to do. They can come up and ask for your pilot documents, they can ask for the aircraft documents. And what they're doing is they're following a very specific checklist out of the 8900.1, which I have with me here today, printed it off. And you'll also see links in the video description, as well as if you're listening on podcast format in the podcast notes. So if you want to pull this up, you can. This comes from the 8900.1, which is a public document anybody has access to. So that's the really nice thing, is if you're worried about getting ramp inspected, you know exactly what the FAA is going to ask because they have their checklist that's out there and published. And this is one of the scenarios that I use during check rides to verify that you know what is required that you have on your person as a pilot and what has to be on board the airplane. So as a DPE during a check ride, I might ask, hey, I'm from the FAA, I'm here to ramp inspect you. What are you required to give me? So that's what we're going to go over today, and maybe in a little more detail about what a ramp inspection looks like. All right, like most FAA documents, this document, which comes out of the 8900.1, Volume 6, Chapter 1, Section 4. How's that for confusing? There's a lot of information on this document, and reading through it, kind of deciphering, kind of the same stuff I do with the Airman Certification Standards. It takes maybe somebody that's experienced in reading this regulation to really show you what the meat of this regulation is. So we're going to skip over to page 6, and that's where it has actually the procedures for how to do the ramp inspection, is page 6. Now, in the back of this, there's also a checklist, and this is the same checklist that the person from the FSDO or the FAA will use to make sure they cover everything. So on here, it says the pilot name, address, inspection location, inspector name, and then it goes down for aircrew information. It leaves room for us to write down all the certificate numbers and date of expiration grades. And then the inspection items, it has 2 columns, one for satisfactory and one for unsatisfactory, and then a little bit of room for remarks. Then on the back of this page, or on the back of the document itself, we have a flow chart, which actually shows, it's kind of a decision tree, where if we reach a point where there's unsatisfactory things being discovered, what do we have to do then? In case of a bad day with a ramp inspection, it may lead to this document, an 8620-1, which is an aircraft condition notice. This might be issued to an aircraft owner or operator if the FAA, during the course of a ramp inspection, finds that the airplane is unairworthy somehow. They're going to issue one of these. So the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to come up and introduce themselves. They have to identify themselves as FAA. They have to show you their FAA credentials. That's all in this document here. Once they're done with that, they're going to ask for your airman documents. So for that purpose, I've got a volunteer pilot that was really excited to get a ramp inspection today, and that's Mr. John Taylor. All right, John. Hi, I'm Seth with the FAA. Good to meet you.
How's it going?
Yeah. All right, well, I'm just here doing a ramp inspection. I kind of need your, or if you don't mind sharing, your required information.
Sure. So here's my pilot certificate, my medical certificate, and a government photo ID.
All right, great. John did great. We need a pilot certificate, a photo ID, a government-issued photo ID, and a medical certificate. And what I'm going to do now as a FAA inspector is I'm going to take down the commercial pilot certificate number. I see that you're commercially rated. This was issued in August of 2022. And then I can see on the back your airplane single engine land and sea. Nice. Airplane multi-engine land and instrument airplane. So today we're inspecting a multi-engine airplane. So if I didn't see airplane multi-engine land, we might have a more complicated conversation here. So I'm good to see that. Also, I noticed that today is May 19th of 2023. This was issued on August 1st of 2022, so I already know you're current for what?
Oh, flight review.
Yeah, right, your flight review. Because the flight reviews due every 24 calendar months. This was issued less than 24 calendar months ago, and I know that a check ride for the issuance of a certificate counts towards a flight review. So unless this was just reissued because of a change of address or something, I know that your flight review is still valid. Now, you as the pilot don't have to prove to me that you've conducted a flight review. I'll hand you those back. But it's probably something that the FAA is going to bring up, and that's actually in here on page 7. It talks about, if available, examine pilot logbooks or other reliable records to determine recency of experience qualifications such as flight review, IPC, and PIC proficiency check. Which PIC proficiency check, not required for the Travel Air. That's something for a turbine aircraft. But the flight review and IPC, depending on what type of flying that you're doing, the IPC is required, and then the flight review. So, do you have those documents available to you?
Sure. So I've got my flight review. I completed phase 3 of the basic wings program, which means my flight review now expires April 30th of 2024.
Nice. So that's actually a really smart move on John's point, because instead of just pulling out his logbook and saying that he did a flight review, he's pulling out his FAA safety.gov website account showing that he's completed a phase of wings in the past 12 calendar months, which is very good, because as a FAA person, I really like to see wings participation. So already John's kind of proven to me, hey, I'm playing by the rules. I'm using the FAA's pilot proficiency program. Nothing to see here. This isn't the pilot you're looking for, type deal. And it sounds funny, and I joke at it a little bit, but the FAA actually talks about how having a current phase of wings is kind of a get out of jail free card. So already, if you can prove to the ramp inspector or the FAA inspector that your wing's current, that's going to make the rest of your conversation go a lot smoother, I think. Okay, so I've already verified, hey, you've got all your documents, you shared your flight review with me. I may even ask for the logbook if it's available. Now, are you required to carry your logbook?
No.
Yeah, exactly. So you didn't have to have his logbook, but if you did, I may ask for 3 takeoffs and landings in the previous 90 days if you're flying with passengers, something like that. But probably not going to come up. I'm not going to dig too much, and you don't even have to share that information with me. Now, if you had passengers on the plane, we might discuss kind of the nature of that flight. Are these passengers participating in cost sharing? Are they paying for the flight? If they're paying for the flight, how is that legal? Are you, do you have a student on board? If you're providing instruction, I might ask to see your CFI certificate. All these other things could come up depending on kind of how in-depth the inspector wants to go and how much you're willing to share as a pilot. I would, me personally, I wouldn't try to stonewall and just give exactly what they ask for and what's required legally. I'm a little more comfortable around the FAA, honestly, so I'm going to probably share with them all about my flight and just prove to them, hey, I know what I'm doing. I know that this flight is legal, and I've got all my documents good to go, and there's really nothing to see here. So if I look at my checklist here, my inspection items here, I've got pilot certificates. We're good to go there. I've got your pilot experience and qualification. I've marked on that, satisfactory. And then the biennial flight review, the FAA's document's actually a little out of date because this still says biennial, so FAA, you need to fix your stuff. It's just a flight review now. But I would mark that as satisfactory as well. And in the remarks, I might put for the flight review section that your wings phase complete and your completion date. Up here at the top on the certificates, I would have recorded your pilot certificate number, the grade of the certificate, your medical. I've made sure the names all match, and we're all good to go there. So next, we're going to walk around to the side of the aircraft. I'm just going to say, all right, now I need to see your the aircraft documents that are required to be on the aircraft. So you ready to show me that?
Sure.
All right, let's go. All right, so we're here to the side of the airplane because I've finished inspecting John's pilot documents, and I've asked him to get in the airplane and show me the airplane's documents. So section F of this document, or this section actually, is inspect aircraft documents. So the first one is determine the operator displays the proper airworthiness certificate at the cabin or cockpit entrance. So the airworthiness certificate and the registration, these two documents, they have to be visible as I get on the airplane as a passenger. Now, it's not real specific about where these need to be located, just someplace that's visible as I enter the plane. The main thing is if you're in a larger airplane and maybe you've got them tucked away behind a seat in the back and they're not readily visible to passengers, that might be an issue. You can order some clear sleeves to post on your airplane to put them somewhere in the cockpit. And a lot of planes, especially the new ones coming out right now, there'll be a place for them specifically up in the cockpit where it's really easy to access. So I'm going to make sure that those are visible, and then I'm going to ask to see them. He's going to take them out of their sleeves. And I'm going to look and make sure, obviously, the tail numbers, the serial numbers match, that the registration is current. As a reminder, it's May 19th, 2023. The registration changed a few months ago in January, where it's valid now for 7 years. So for the time being, I might see some registrations that expire in less than 7, but the FAA should be sending those out to owners to extend them out to 7 years if you have a current registration now. So I'm going to make sure the registration is current. The airworthiness certificate doesn't expire, but I'm going to make sure that the airworthiness certificate isn't damaged where I can't see it anymore. This is a 1959 model airplane, and there's some frayed edges around the the airworthiness certificate of this plane. I might go ahead and order a new one. You can get those reissued, and they look a lot cleaner. On an old airplane, that could definitely be an issue. So I'm going to flip back to my inspection sheet here, where it kind of gives me my checklist that I'm going to go through. Once I verify the airworthiness certificate's good, I'm going to make sure the registration certificate's good. And then I'm going to ask for the radio station licenses if that's required. Now, if we're not flying internationally, radio station license isn't required, so I'll probably skip past that because we've already talked about the nature of your business. I don't expect you to have one of those on the plane. And then some sort of operating limitations. So we generally refer to this as the POH, but not all airplanes have POHs. Some of them are placarded aircraft, so all the limitations are on placards in the plane. So that's why it says operating limitations, not necessarily a pilot operating handbook. So what John is holding here is, you can go ahead and show the camera there. This is our flight manual for the Travel Air. So all the documents that I'm about to ask for are all in this binder. So if you're watching this video and don't have a binder like this, I would suggest going and creating one. It's pretty simple. So I'm going to take this. I'll just take it from John, kind of look through it. Right here I see, hey, this is a FAA approved flight manual. That's what I want to see. And then also, if I take this sheet out, it'll actually be signed and for the serial number of this airplane. Notice that the flight manual is a pretty short affair. It's not that long. Next, I'm going to see, here's our weight and balance. This is just a helpful chart for us to know what the arms are and the stations. But the real weight and balance will look something like this. Not all weight balances look the same, but generally they're going to be on one sheet of paper. They're going to have a signature of an AMPIA. So that AMP needs to have signed that document. And I'm looking for a couple of things on here. I'm looking for an empty weight, an empty CG, and a moment. I'm also looking for the previous weight and balance one to show that, yes, there was the previous one. We removed, it looks like, 2 generators, 2 regulators, added 2 alternators and voltage regulators. They were at the same arm positions, but they have different weights. And so this is a mathematical calculation of our new weight and balance. So I know that this is verified by a calculation versus putting the plane on actual weight scales and weighing it to see what the current weight and balance is. So right there, we've got the airworthiness certificate, the registration, operating limitations, weight and balance. And then the next thing on the checklist is a minimum equipment list. So if you're flying a new airplane built really in the 2000s, you'll probably have a kinds of operation equipment list. So if you have a KOEL, it's going to list out for day VFR flying, for instance, here's all the equipment that you need to have operative. Now, without asking to go inside of your aircraft, I can check the operation of some of those things. So obviously, I've got a rotating beacon. You might not be able to see that behind me here, but if I walk up to the airplane and the rotating beacon's all busted and I can tell that it's not working, that may lead me to issue some paperwork to you because that's required equipment per this aircraft's minimum equipment list. Because now, even though this plane doesn't have a minimum equipment list, it does have a TCDS, or a Type Certificate Data Sheet. And that Type Certificate Data Sheet does list a rotating beacon. So the plane was certified with a rotating beacon. And in general, if the plane was certified with a piece of equipment, it really needs to be operative for you to legally fly around that airplane. Now, there are some exceptions there. Since this airplane didn't have a minimum equipment list from the factory other than the one in the TCDS, the checklist item here really isn't applicable. Where this is applicable is if you were in a turbine aircraft. So if you're in a turbine aircraft, a minimum equipment list, you have kind of three options. Everything has to work. You have to have the master minimum equipment list from the FAA, or you have to have an approved minimum equipment list. Both of those require letters of authorization, so I would be asking to see all of those documents. Or you would have to demonstrate that everything in the plane is operative, and really that's kind of difficult. So really what you would do is I would just ask to go on board the airplane, and I would see if there's any placarded equipment. So if I get on the airplane and I see something's placarded in op and you don't have an MEL, we might have an issue there on a turbine aircraft. Now for this aircraft, again, there's no MEL, so really that kind of doesn't apply. The next thing on here is aeronautical charts. So I'd ask to see and make sure you have the appropriate aeronautical charts on board for the type of flying that you're doing. If you're doing instrument flying, I would expect to see instrument database or nav databases on the GPS to be current. If you're equipped with that, I would expect to see your IFR charts up to date on your ForeFlight, and I might ask to see that. If we go back a little bit here, page 8 is where it lists several different things that I'm going to check on the aircraft. So I'm determining if the registration, the N number is valid and it matches all the documents. We already did that. Determine if there's a approved AFM on board. We did that. Weight and balance, we got that. Good to go. A letter of deviation, if applicable. That's not applicable to us today. Operator is leasing the aircraft. Determine that the aircraft is carrying a copy of the lease agreement or contract. Note the expiration date on the lease and determine if the lease is still valid. Now this is a really good point I'm going to talk about just a little bit because I'm going to do a video later that talks about basically ways you can get in trouble as a commercial pilot. So if you're flying commercially or private, but primarily if you're a commercial pilot, and you're flying an aircraft that's in some sort of lease agreement, you really need to be asking a lot of questions, and you need to make sure that the lease is on board the aircraft. And you need to know where it's at and be knowledgeable enough to talk through the lease and prove to the FAA that, hey, this is a valid lease. There's a truth in leasing advisory circular that you have to comply with if that's applicable. Now, that's not applicable for everyone, but if you are flying a leased aircraft, that is something that I can ask for as a FAA inspector. Determine copies of the approved Cat 2 or Cat 3 authorization flight manuals. So Cat 2, Cat 3, those are types of precision approaches that the plane has to have the letter of authorization for, as well as an RVSM. So if you're flying an RVSM airspace, I'm going to want to see the LOA for that if that's applicable. Determine if pertinent current aeronautical charts are available, and then ask the operator what type of instrument approaches they conduct, ILS, DME, area navigation, GPS, and determine if the radio required navigation equipment is installed for the specific operations conducted. So that's why I mentioned we would have that discussion of kind of what's the nature of your flight. I'm doing a couple things there. I'm just being a nice person and just showing some interest in you. And I'm also getting some information that I need as an examiner so I can ask the right questions later on. And then I'm going to go to the inspect the aircraft part. And we're not going to drag the video through here, but I'm going to talk through what I would be inspecting on the airplane. Let me just say this. The FAA is really short-manned right now. They don't have a lot of people. Their time is very valuable, so unless you've given them a reason that you're acting sus and like something might be wrong with the plane, they're probably not going to just pick your airplane apart. Now, the AOPA has a document on there. Do you have your ForeFlight?
Yeah.
So pull that up. We'll show that on the screen as well. But John, now he's getting a little nervous because I'm asking him to get on his airplane. He's like, well, give me 5 minutes. I'm going to look at my documentation here. So if you go to your documents, and you should be seeing this on screen here with you, we're going to go down to ForeFlight, and then all the way at the bottom, AOPA,
Okay.
and then what to do if stopped by law enforcement. So John's downloading that document. I would recommend everybody have this and kind of go through it. AOPA wrote this, And it's a step-by-step instructions on what to do if you're stopped by law enforcement and have a ramp inspection. So reading through these, it's saying, hey, ask the law enforcement official in charge about the nature, why are you doing this? Obviously, you want to ask and make sure they are who they say they are, so you're going to check their ID. Step 2, request credentials. And then step 3, they'll most likely ask you to present your pilot and aircraft documents. Okay, we already did that. And then it lists out the FAR 61.3, 61.51 that a person must present his or her certificates to the FAA. So that's not in doubt here, right? We have to show the FAA our pilot documents, and we have to show them the aircraft documents. Now, if we go over a page here, step 4, it says, law enforcement officials may ask to search your aircraft or state that they are going to inspect or search the aircraft and its contents visually, physically, or with dogs. Consider responding with the following statements. I do not consent to the search. If you remove or disassemble any part of the aircraft, including inspection plates, you may be rendering this aircraft unairworthy. If you're a member of the AOPA Pilot Protection Services, basically you can give them a call. So it says consider responding in that way. It's not giving you legal advice. If you call that phone number and you can get actual legal advice from AOPA, that may be what they consider doing. I think in John's case, he's not worried. This airplane's good to go. It's fresh out of annual. He's wings current. He's already established a good working relationship between us during this ramp inspection. So he's going to say, yeah, Seth, you can climb on board and inspect whatever you want. Now, if I'm an FAA person, I start removing inspection plates, that's where I might jump in and say, hey, I would really rather you not start disassembling the aircraft. You can look for placards and stuff, that's fine, but I don't know how I feel about you disassembling the airplane. So here's in the FAA guidance, some of the stuff that they're going to do is inspecting items such as cracked, damaged, loose, or missing fasteners, inspects seats and safety belts for proper installation. If applicable, determine if operators conducted a VOR equipment check. Determine if the ELT is installed, and then check the expiration of the battery. Determine that the aircraft's identification plate exists and is secured to the aircraft exterior. And then inspect to determine that all required placards are present and legible. So that's really the 6 things that this document says that they're going to search your aircraft with. It's not a really in-depth inspection. They're not out here doing an annual inspection or 100-hour inspection on your airplane. They're just going to check for kind of the surface level stuff. The rest of this document is spent talking about turbine aircraft and helicopter aircraft. To finish up our checklist here, we have 2 pages of the checklist. The inspect the aircraft includes the general airworthiness, ELT battery, VOR check, seats and safety belts, and then the inspection results. So that's kind of the last thing that the checklist talks about and what it would end with. What I really like about this document is it has this nice flow chart. So the flow chart starts with present your FAA ID, examine the airman certificates. We did that, so that was satisfactory. Then we examine the aircraft documents. If that's satisfactory, we inspect the aircraft. If that's satisfactory, we determine the inspection results, and we note it in the job aid and complete a PTRS report, which I really don't know what that is. It's probably some FAA system where they're going to log as a successful ramp inspection. And that's if we look at the left-hand side of this paper. The right-hand side of the paper is if we find anything that's unsatisfactory. So if I'm an inspector and I run into something that's unsatisfactory, like you don't have your proper documents, the airplane doesn't have its proper documents, or I find the airplane in an unairworthy state, then I'm probably going to file what's called an 8620-1 form. This 86-21 form, they give you a copy of it in here. Now, I think it's done digitally nowadays, but used to, it was in triplicate, and it looks like this right here. And it would be on kind of the old school receipt style, and it would have a pink slip copy that's going to stay with the aircraft. The other copy is going to get sent to Oklahoma City, and then they're going to send you as the operator. If you happen to be the owner operator, they'll send it to you, the address of the registered owner. They'll send you a copy of that and also kind of a get well plan saying, you need to notify us when you correct these deficiencies that we found during the ramp inspection. So let's say they find they're doing a walk around the airplane, which they're allowed to do, by the way, and they find maybe a couple rivets missing or a flight control surface that's cracked beyond limits and looks unsafe. They're going to, what's called red tag it, is kind of what you might have heard. They're going to red tag it, send that to Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City is going to send you the owner. You're having a bad day now. Sorry, John. So they're going to send you the owner. They're going to say, hey, your plane's unairworthy. Please send us a copy of the return to service document once you have that completed. So then as the owner, what are you thinking you're going to have to do now?
Find a mechanic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, John here is going to have to find a mechanic. The mechanic's going to have to fix whatever went wrong. We're going to have a copy of that, and we're going to send that back to the FAA to get back in compliance. And that's if that's found during the course of a ramp inspection. If you're doing a regular annual inspection and you find something that's unairworthy and you have a mechanic fix it, you don't have to notify the FAA that you did all of that. You just have to document it. If the FAA finds it, however, they issue one of these documents, then you're going to have to bring the FAA into the loop of how you get that fixed. So we'll go back to you're having a good day.
Okay.
And your pilot documents were good, the aircraft documents were good, and the aircraft inspection resulted in a good pass. So I'm going to say, all right, well, it's been, I've spent about 20 minutes in total going through this whole ramp inspection. You've done a great job, man. Enjoy your flying today, and I'm going to go back to the office and file all my paperwork. And that's it. That's a ramp inspection. So I've taken a lot of time to go through in detail what's going to happen on a ramp inspection, but like I said, it's only going to take maybe 15 to 20 minutes to do the whole thing through. And if everything's in compliance, it's going to be really easy. So I would really suggest doing what John did. Make sure you're current in phase of wings every 12 calendar months. So make sure your FAAsafety.gov completed phase of wings. Make sure you have a binder like I have built for my airplanes. That has all the required documents. One thing that I forgot to show is what's also in this binder are flight supplements. And that's another thing that I'm going to ask for when I do the inspection, because when I walk up in the airplane, I'll see a G5. Well, a Garmin G5, I think they got STC'd in the late, in 2015 or something, somewhere around there. Yeah. This plane was built in 1959, so I know it didn't come from the factory with that. So what I'm going to immediately start looking for is, well, there's a G5 and a 430 in there. I'm going to need to see flight manual supplements for both of those, and they're both in here. So as a DPE, that's what I do when I get in an airplane that I'm going to give a check ride in, is I'll make sure that all the flight supplements are there, as well as the operating limitations for the aircraft. So I think that's about covers it. Thanks for watching.